For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just sitting up here listening to y'all's testimony. It's just absolutely insane, the level of the deep state acting to go after pro-life groups, pro-gun groups that you, Mr. Tedesco, taught, the Arkansas pro-life group that now they can't even bank at the bank that they were banking at because of their political beliefs. The information that the chairman put up about people purchasing religious texts and firearms, all without a warrant. I mean, you know, you go to law school and they teach you constitutional law and the Fourth Amendment and all these things that have to happen in order for the government to get information about you or to search your information. And all of this is happening without even the person knowing that it's going on, without a warrant, without an ability to even to defend themselves. In the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, at the U.S. Department of Treasury told major banks to be on the lookout for customers using credit and debit cards for the purchase of legal firearms. As a gun owner and a strong proponent of our Second Amendment rights, it's appalling that a federal agency would ask private companies to spy on their customers conducting perfectly legal business transactions. It's not like there's a suspicion of criminality going on. These are just typical purchases of firearms. FinCEN also passed along a report to several large banks titled Bankrolling Bigotry, an overview of the online funding strategies of American hate groups. Included among those supposed hate groups is the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is represented before us today by Mr. Tedesco. I found this characterization curious because the ADF that I know is anything but a hate group. ADF defends Americans' God-given right to religious liberty in courts around this country, but it seems the Biden administration views advocacy for religious liberty as hate these days. That says far more about the administration than it does about ADF. President Obama once infamously remarked that many conservative Americans cling to guns or religion, and given FinCEN's actions, it seems that President Biden's administration shares the same hostility for millions of Americans like me who proudly cling to our First and Second Amendment rights. Mr. Tedesco, what's your reaction to your organization being identified as a hate group in a report shared by a government agency?
It's unbelievable that that is being used by the federal government to advise banks on domestic terrorist threats. But I think the bigger point here is that the concept of hate is a tool of suppression. And on top of that, that kind of language, hate speech and similar kinds of vague concepts are permeated throughout the financial industry and are used to shut down events and to debank people. JP Morgan Chase has used it several times. Arkansas Family Policy, they said it was high risk. They shut down an event by Defense of Liberty. On behalf, Donald Trump Jr. was speaking at it. They shut down that event on the basis of a hate policy. So we know these policies are being weaponized in the financial industry. And again, because of the Bank Secrecy Act and a lot of the shrouding of the way regulation happens in the banking context, it's really hard to know why are these things happening. We just know it's on the rise, and it's a real concern.
Well, and one of my colleagues was just saying that this is just a narrative that we're creating, a political narrative, but you've gone through specifics. If you want to highlight specifically some of these instances that you're referring to of facts where pro-life groups or organizations that are conservative have been debanked by these private entities.
Sure, the highest profile one is a former member of the Senate, Samuel Brownback's organization, National Committee for Religious Freedom. JP Morgan Chase canceled that account in 2022. They gave an escalating and very different reasons that were contradictory over the next year as scrutiny mounted. None of the reasons ever held any weight. Interestingly enough, they referred to anti-money laundering, financing of terrorism, a concept called politically exposed persons. All of these are within the banking regulations, and I think are used as tools ultimately to suppress people because of their views. Again, the secrecy and the shrouding of the reasons for the decisions is a huge part of the problem, and I think that's something Congress needs to address.
And is there circumstances in which the consumers may never know that their information was privately disclosed from the bank to the FBI or a government agency?
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge part of the problem is our clients, to a person, anytime they go to the bank, once they get debanked, it's always under some vague policy. The only thing the bank will say is high risk or business type or risk tolerance. every time they go back and ask for an answer, a specific reason, the bank just stonewalls them. And so they can't get access to the information.
I only have a couple seconds left. So what is your recourse if you do find out? So let's say, because I basically ticked a lot of those boxes that were referenced, firearms, Bibles, religious texts. So if you do find out that your information was divulged from the bank that you bank to a government agency, do you have any recourse whatsoever to go after the government or the bank?
It's difficult for consumers who are in that position because they usually don't know it happens. If it happens, there are consumer complaints you can file with state attorneys general. There's probably other avenues that people could pursue, but I think that's part of the reason why Congress should act to cordon off some of the secrecy and confidentiality that's happening in the banking industry, and also affirmatively require banks to stop using reputational risk and some of these other vague categories to determine whether they're going to bank with someone.
Thank you all for being here today.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous